What happens when a federal judge says the president broke the law, and then a higher court tells that judge to stand down and drop everything? That's not a hypothetical. That's exactly what just happened in the United States. A bombshell ruling dropped on April 14, 2026, and it has set off a firestorm in Washington, D.C., because at its core, this isn't just about immigration flights or courtroom procedure. This is a battle over something far more fundamental: whether the executive branch of the United States government is actually required to follow court orders at all. Stay with us, because this story goes deeper than the headlines, and the implications could reshape American democracy for generations. Welcome back. If you're new here, this channel covers the geopolitical and political events shaping our world. No spin, no fluff, just the story. Let's get into it. To understand what's happening right now, we have to rewind to the spring of 2025, because this legal saga didn't start yesterday. It's been building for over a year, and what just unfolded is the latest and perhaps most explosive chapter yet. In March 2025, the Trump administration made an extraordinary move. Citing the Alien Enemies Act, an 18th-century wartime law originally passed in 1798, President Trump authorized the deportation of Venezuelan migrants to El Salvador. Now, let's pause on that for a second. The Alien Enemies Act. This is a law that was written when George Washington was still alive. It was designed to be used in times of declared war against foreign nationals from enemy nations. It had been used just a handful of times in American history, most infamously during World War II. Trump's administration invoked it against migrants they accused of being members of a Venezuelan gang called Tren de Aragua. Civil rights organizations immediately challenged this in court. And on March 15, 2025, U.S. District Judge James Boasberg, the chief judge of the federal trial court in Washington, D.C., issued a temporary restraining order. In plain English, he said, "Stop the flights. Do not transfer these migrants to El Salvador until we sort this out legally." And then, the planes took off anyway. 2 plane loads of migrants, all of whom were supposed to be protected by Boasberg's order, flew out of the United States and landed in El Salvador. There, they were transferred to one of the most notorious prisons in the entire Western Hemisphere, CECOT, a mega-prison housing tens of thousands of alleged gang members, where conditions have drawn widespread international condemnation. Let that sink in. A federal judge issued a lawful court order, and the administration of the United States of America chose to ignore it. Judge Boasberg was furious, and he didn't hide it. Boasberg said the Trump administration may have acted in bad faith by trying to rush Venezuelan migrants out of the country in defiance of his order, and noted that he gave the administration ample opportunity to rectify or explain their actions, but concluded that none of their responses has been satisfactory. So Judge Boasberg did what judges do when their orders are defied. He opened a criminal contempt investigation. In a blockbuster ruling that sent shockwaves through Washington, he found that probable cause existed to believe the government had willfully violated his order. He wanted answers. He wanted witnesses. He ordered Drew Ensign, a senior Justice Department official, to testify under oath. Ensign had been involved in the court proceedings around the deportation flights on March 15, 2025, and the department previously acknowledged that he promptly conveyed Boasberg's orders to DHS and Justice Department leadership. Boasberg also wanted to hear from another key figure, Erez Reuveni, a former Justice Department lawyer who had filed a whistleblower complaint. Reuveni alleged in that complaint that a then-top DOJ official told his colleagues in March that the administration intended to ignore court orders amid Trump's aggressive deportation effort. Think about what that means. A whistleblower from inside the Justice Department was claiming that administration officials had openly discussed ignoring court rulings. This wasn't speculation. This was a sworn allegation from someone who was in the room. Boasberg was determined. He said in November, as he announced plans to restart the contempt proceedings,
I certainly intend to find out what happened on that day. This has been sitting for a long time, and I believe that justice requires me to move promptly on this. But the Trump administration had no intention of letting that happen. What followed was a legal war fought across multiple courtrooms over an entire year. The Trump administration appealed several times to the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, so the contempt proceedings never fully got underway, halting the judge's work while the appellate court considered whether he had the power to move ahead with the inquiry. Round after round, the Trump administration found ways to delay, appeal, and block Boasberg's investigation from ever truly beginning. It was legal trench warfare, and it worked, at least for a while. Then, in a major development, the full D.C. Circuit Court, meaning all the judges together, not just a small panel, gave Boasberg the green light to restart the proceedings. It seemed like the investigation was finally going to happen. But the Trump appointees on the appellate court weren't done, and on April 14, 2026, they delivered what may be the decisive blow.
A divided three-judge panel from the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals issued its ruling. Two judges, both appointed by Donald Trump, voted to shut down Boasberg's contempt investigation entirely. One judge, appointed by President Biden, dissented. Judges Naomi Rao and Justin Walker said in their unsigned opinion that Boasberg's contempt probe represented a clear abuse of power, given that the administration had previously identified then Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem as the official responsible for deciding to allow the deportations to continue. The district court proposes to probe high-level executive branch deliberations about matters of national security and diplomacy. These proceedings are a clear abuse of discretion, they wrote. The majority also made a critical legal argument about the nature of Boasberg's original order. Circuit Judge Naomi Rao wrote that criminal contempt is only available for the violation of an order that is clear and specific, and argued that Boasberg's March 2025 order did not clearly and specifically bar the government from transferring the plaintiffs into Salvadoran custody. In other words, they argued there was ambiguity in the judge's wording, and that because of that alleged ambiguity, the administration couldn't be held in criminal contempt. The two judges also described Boasberg's attempts to gather testimony as a threat to executive power. They said the judge's plans for testimony improperly threaten an open-ended, freewheeling inquiry into executive branch decision-making on matters of national security that implicate ongoing military and diplomatic initiatives. They described his efforts as a judicial intrusion into the autonomy of a co-equal department. Rao and Walker also revisited the original hearing, noting that when Boasberg demanded officials turn around the planes in a hastily called hearing, he did not explicitly say officials could not transfer the migrants to Salvadoran custody. Those instructions only came in a written order he issued after the hearing concluded. In our constitutional system of government, criminal liability cannot turn on the unstated intentions or post hoc assertions of a district court judge. The Trump administration celebrated the ruling immediately. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche said on X, "Today's decision by the D.C. Circuit should finally end Judge Boasberg's year-long campaign against the hardworking department attorneys doing their jobs fighting illegal immigration." But not everyone on that three-judge panel agreed, not even close. Judge Michelle Childs, the Biden appointee, wrote a dissenting opinion that stretched nearly 80 pages. That's not a minor disagreement. That's a judge putting on the record that she believes something deeply important is being broken. Childs said the court's majority had trampled on Boasberg's authority in a way that will affect not only these contempt proceedings, but will also echo in future proceedings against all litigants. She warned, now any litigant can argue based on their preferred interpretation of a court's order that they did not commit contempt before contempt findings are even made.
Think about what that means in practice. If a party to a lawsuit, whether it's a corporation, an individual, or the federal government, can simply claim they interpreted a judge's order differently and use that claim to shut down any accountability proceedings before they even begin, then the power of courts to enforce their own orders is severely weakened. Childs captured the stakes powerfully in her dissent. Contempt of court is a public offense, and the fate of our democratic republic will depend on whether we treat it as such. The lawyers representing the deportees are not giving up. Lee Glarant, the lead attorney from the American Civil Liberties Union, said the lawyers will ask the full D.C. Circuit to review the latest decision from the three-judge panel. The opinion is a blow to the rule of law. Our system is built on the executive branch, including the president, respecting court orders. In this case, there is no longer any question that the Trump administration willfully violated the court's order. So, the fight isn't over. A request to have the full D.C. Circuit, all the judges together, review this decision could restart the legal battle, and from there it could potentially go all the way to the Supreme Court. Meanwhile, what happened to the migrants at the center of all this? The flights carrying the migrants deported under the sweeping 18th century wartime authority continued to El Salvador, even after Boasberg's orders, and the migrants were imprisoned there until last summer when they were released as part of a prisoner swap with Venezuela. More recently, Boasberg has ordered the Trump administration officials to work to provide some of those migrants with an opportunity to contest their removal under the Alien Enemies Act, and the D.C. Circuit is currently reviewing that decision too. So, even with the contempt investigation shut down, the legal battles surrounding these deportations are far from finished.
Here's what makes this story so significant, and why it matters far beyond the specifics of these particular deportation flights. The United States is built on a constitutional system known as the separation of powers. 3 branches of government: executive, legislative, judicial, each acting as a check and balance on the others. No one branch is supposed to be all-powerful. That's the entire design. When the executive branch defies a court order, it strikes at the foundation of that design. Courts derive their power from the expectation, the requirement, that their rulings will be enforced and respected. If the government can simply ignore court orders it finds inconvenient and then use the courts themselves to block any accountability for doing so, then what exactly is the rule of law? The White House has portrayed Boasberg as a biased judge who overstepped his authority. And it's worth noting, Trump himself has called for impeaching Boasberg, a call that drew a rare public rebuke from Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts, who publicly rejected calls for the judge's impeachment. PBS, the fact that the nation's top judge felt the need to publicly defend the independence of the judiciary tells you something important about how high the tension is running. This isn't a routine political disagreement. This is a clash over the most fundamental question in American governance. Who has the final word? Is it the courts? Is it the executive? And when those two come into direct conflict, what mechanisms exist to hold anyone accountable? The April 14th ruling has set a precedent, and it's a troubling one for those who believe in judicial independence. By ruling that the administration's interpretation of Boasberg's order was legally defensible enough to shut down the contempt probe, the appeals court has made it significantly harder for judges to hold the executive branch accountable in the future. If administrations can always claim ambiguity in court orders as a shield against contempt proceedings, that's a powerful new tool for evading judicial oversight. At the same time, the fact that one judge, Judge Childs, wrote an 80-page dissent shows that this is not a settled question. The legal community is deeply divided. Civil liberties organizations are mobilizing, and the full D.C. Circuit, if it agrees to review this decision, could reverse it entirely. The Emilini migrants who were at the center of this case have been released, but the constitutional questions they unwittingly became part of are still very much alive.
The Alien Enemies Act deportation powers are still being challenged. The question of whether judges can enforce their orders against a resistant executive branch is still unresolved. And perhaps most importantly, if the executive branch faced no real legal consequences for defying a court order in March 2025, what message does that send going forward? What you've just watched unfold is not just an immigration story. It's a story about power. Who has it, who checks it, and what happens when those checks start to break down. A judge ordered planes to turn around. The planes didn't turn around. An investigation was launched. That investigation has now been shut down, and the people who were on those planes spent months in one of the world's most brutal prisons before a diplomatic swap set them free. Whether you believe the administration was right to prioritize national security, or whether you believe the rule of law demands that court orders be followed without exception, this story forces every American to confront a question that doesn't have an easy answer. What is the Constitution actually worth if no one enforces it? That's the question hanging over Washington right now, and we'll be watching closely as the ACLU pushes for a full-circuit review, as Boasberg continues to oversee related cases, and as the broader battle over executive power plays out in courts across the country. If you found this breakdown valuable, hit that like button, subscribe for more in-depth geopolitical coverage, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Do courts still have the power to check the executive branch? We want to hear from you. We'll see you in the next one.